Now that I've finished Tides of War, it's time to select my next book, and I've decided I'm due for another classic. I try and get a couple classics under my belt every year to balance out my reading, and I've decided it's high time I tackled the Epic of Gilgamesh, which I've never read yet, so it's time to check this one off the list. Now, this is, in addition to just being one of those famous books that's always kind of vaguely on your to-do list, this is inspired indirectly by Steve Donahue and the Western Canon Starter Kit series of videos he made a number of years ago, in which he advocated that if you want to become well-read, the way to do it is systematically. So instead of jumping around all over time, which is what I have been doing, start at the beginning, read your way through the classics, and get them done systematically because they all influence each other. So it's based on those series of videos that I've been rereading the Bible. I read this as a youngster, but I'm now rereading it again. And why in the past couple years, I reread the Iliad and the Odyssey. Now, I am making terribly slow progress on this whole project. At the rate I'm going, I'm never going to be done with the ancient world before I'm dead, with just a couple books a year. But so be it. If I never succeed in reading the whole Western canon, maybe I'll succeed in reading some of it. And that hopefully that some of it will have been worth my while. Now, Steve Donahue actually, I think, recommends that you start with the Bible and recommends that you skip the Epic of Gilgamesh, or I think he says you can read it if you want to. But the real starting point is the Bible. Hopefully I'm remembering him correctly. And I believe the reason he says that is because the Epic of Gilgamesh was lost to history for most of the past 2,000 years. It was, according to the introduction here, which I'm just started reading, it was very influential back in its day. They were widely circulated back in the ancient Mesopotamia, but then got completely lost to history and was not found again until 1850, which means that nobody was referencing the Epic of Gilgamesh in the Middle Ages. Nobody was referencing the Epic of Gilgamesh in the Enlightenment. And that's why the Bible and Shakespeare are much more influential on English literature than the Epic of Gilgamesh is, even though the Epic of Gilgamesh is older. I think that's Steve's reason for not putting this on his Western Canon Starter Kit. But nevertheless, it is, besides maybe just being of interest for its own sake, I think maybe deserves a place on the Western Canon reading list. It gives us a glimpse into the cultures of the ancient Mesopotamia. And even though it wasn't directly influencing any of the literature in the Middle Ages or the Enlightenment, it perhaps indirectly influenced some of the other literature in the ancient world. For example, the Bible. I think I expect to be better informed about this after I've finished the book. Keep in mind, this is a video I'm making before having started to read it. But I'm given to understand that both of these books have a flood story. Well, I know the Bible does, but there's a big flood story as well in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And this is the flood story that was circulating all around Mesopotamia and which also influenced the Bible. So you can see there are similar influences here. The Epic of Gilgamesh is, I think the standard version is 3,000 years old. And it says somewhere here that it goes back to at least being 4,000 years old at the origins. So, one of the even though it was lost to history until archaeologists found it again in 1850. One of the oldest stories we have from human history. Older than the Bible, but then the Bible survived and this didn't, at least for a long time. In fact, we still don't have all of it. There's a standard version which has gaps in it. The introduction said we're still missing around fifths of it. But the translator's introduction here informed me of something I was not aware of, which is we are adding to it all the time. So new tablets are still being dug up. The translator's introduction was written in the 90s, so hopefully the Iraq war didn't destroy too many of those archaeological sites, because Iraq is the, I think, principal area where these tablets are found. But there's also, at least as of the date of the translator's introduction here, tablets sitting in museums that we have unearthed already that just haven't been translated yet, because apparently there's a shortage of what does he call them? Assyrianologists, specialties, scholars of Assyria. There's a shortage of them, and not enough apparently to go through all the tablets that we already have established. So, he makes a point in the introduction that we're getting more and more pieces of this all the time. And then he says in another 50 or 100 years, we might have a much fuller version of this than we do now. But as it is now, we have a fuller version than we had in 1850. And in 1850, we had a much fuller version than we had in 1750, because in 1750 we didn't have anything. So the standard version at least has 4/5 of it written down, which hopefully will be enough to be engaging reading. My only real prior experience to this, with this, the Epic of Gilgamesh, was listening to the History of World Literature from the Great Courses series by Professor Grant Vaught, which I really enjoyed. I don't think it's freely available on the internet. You'd have to subscribe to their service. But I had a friend who lent me that course, and I found it absolutely fascinating. So I vaguely remember Grant Vaught's recapitulation of the plot. I remember Enkidu and the animals and the search for immortality. And I remember some of it. Grant Vaught didn't talk a lot about the gaps in the narrative. He made it sound like we have a more or less complete story, or at least enough of it that it can be treated as a complete story. So his analysis was just retelling it as if it was a complete whole. I guess I'll see when I sit down to read it how much the gaps in this interfere with the reading experience. So this edition here, which is a Penguin Classic edition from published in 1999, I believe. And who knows if there have been any more gaps filled in since then. But it's got the standard version, which is about 100 pages. It's got about 50 pages of introduction, of which I'm still beginning. And then it's got various other versions, which fill out the second 100 pages of this. So I don't know if it's going to be a bit of a slog to read all these different versions. After having read the standard version, I mean, why would I want to read another version right afterwards? But I'm going to commit myself to reading this thing cover to cover, and then I'll report back to you when I finish it on any interesting things I learned and what the reading experience of it was like. And then add this to my list of Western canon starters.